record on this. Clap, just for clap's sake. All right, we should be live. I'm going to double check that, but Alex is going to share a link to something on there too. But I guess welcome back to you.
Thank you much. Good to be back. I was in Quebec for 4 or 5 days, visiting a conference on economic development and how they want to see the same kind of thing that's going on in Franklinton, a startup community, a startup neighborhood happen over there. Let me take 2 seconds and just copy-paste the link to the Google Slides presentation. And
I don't know if you're able to multitask both of these, but I saw on the news that there was a bunch of flooding in Montreal.
Yeah.
That didn't affect any of your traveling?
No, but one of our hosts, blast, I just accidentally posted. Let me delete that. One of our hosts' homes was actually inundated, so
really?
There was a lot of flooding. Surprising, a big river city, and it looked like the river itself had a few houses along the banks, and then there were steep cliffs, maybe 50 or 100 feet, and the rest of the city was up that way. So It looked like there were some people affected there, but they had 22 straight days of rain. 22 straight days of rain.
That's crazy.
So let me see. So Google.
What was the name of the
presentation?
Makerspace while you're doing that?
So it wasn't a makerspace. It was their economic development forum proper, and they have an incubator they called The Camp, and they had actually a cute. When you go up to the second floor, the elevator doors open. You're in their lobby area. They have some AstroTurf. They have a little tent. They have these awesome camping gnome mannequins. Fun stuff.
Great. Well, you can go. I keep distracting you while you're trying to do that. But last week we had Blake Compton here. I want to say thanks to him. He was great. It was fantastic. It was a little bit short notice, just because we weren't able to work things out with your schedule, and we were going to try to do it remotely, and it just didn't work out. Blake was able to step in, so I thought that was great. We talked a lot about basically our origin stories, how we got started with the idea of Foundry. And his was interesting to me because he came from the bar that he had opened, which was Hudson Street Hooligans. I can't remember if that's the name of the bar. Did it have Hudson Street? Maybe just the name of it. But anyway, he said that was actually, and I didn't realize this, but that was the reason that he originally got into doing what he does now, which is construction, was because they had made some mistakes with their zoning and their licensing, whatever it was. They didn't get the right permits, and that was what originally got him involved or interested in doing that kind of stuff for a living. So now that's what he does, and I can't believe he considers that his superpower. But it's dealing with bureaucracy, and I couldn't. I told him that too. I couldn't have done it. That's my kryptonite. If that's his superpower, that's my kryptonite, is dealing with bureaucracies and just trying to deal with the silly things. You got to get this form signed by this guy and go down to this office, and that's what he does on a daily basis. But of course, sometimes it becomes tough to do. And of course, we mentioned Killer Queen because you can't have a long conversation with Blake without doing that. But I promised that I would keep it towards the end, so we just talked about it at the very end. And he's doing a new tournament, basically geared towards newer people, on the 3rd. So I think it'll be at Arcade Super Awesome. I can't imagine where else it would be because there's only that one cabinet. But on June 3rd, he's doing that. So if anyone new wants to try out, they're basically rotating who's the queen. That's the hardest thing to do. No new person would just step right in and be the queen. So they're making so everybody has to do it. You have to do it. You learn how to do it. If you're bad, you only have to do it once, and you just rotate out. So, and you just show up. You don't have to form a team. So you show up, and they'll draft you. So that sounds fun. So tell me what we've got going on here. What's with the links?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I'm glad that we've been experimenting with this Facebook Live, podcasting, etc., is to have a two-way communication with Columbus, with both our membership and with the broader city. And this is fun. We're watching 2 people sneak into the chain link fence of the Salazzo property across the way.
I don't know if you can see that on video. I don't.
No.
There they are. Yeah, they're right behind me.
Yeah, there they are. That's funny. So I think we have the tech, and even this morning, walking to my car, I was thinking, how many billions have been spent by Google for Hangout, by Facebook for Facebook Live, by the cell phone companies to build cell phones, for the cell tower industry, and there's this gigantic infrastructure, billions I'm sure, that allows people to have two-way communications with many people that we haven't been doing. And I think it's for no good reason. I think the tech may have just matured in that all of us can now broadcast and receive on our phone. So what we did about 6 months back was to create a couple of Google form questionnaires to ask our community, what kind of events do you want us to host? What kind of classes do you want to teach here? What kind of meetups would you like us to hold at the Foundry? And then even what kind of community build projects? If we have 10 or 20 people who want to get together for an afternoon every month and build something, then surely we'll make the materials available. We'll provide tool time as long as someone can help manage the project. So let's see. It looks like Devin just commented somewhere.
He says this is spectacular.
Video and slides interactive. Great.
Yeah.
So thank you, Devin, one of our longtime stalwart members. So 6 months back, we had these 3 Google forms, and I've posted the results of those forms into that presentation. Now, sorry, I did this about 10 minutes ago, just before we went live, so it's not very pretty. People who know me know I'm more functional than pretty.
I think you're pretty.
Thank you. Pretty functional. So, so if you go into that, if you click on the link for the presentation, the first slide is conversation with the Idea Foundry community. And again, this was December of 2016, so 5-6 months back. And the first graph is what are some of the meetups that our Idea Foundry membership would like us to host. And I think maybe 20 or 30 people responded to this survey. So when it says 50% wanted that, that's about 10 to 15 folks. The number one thing people wanted to see was an organized community build night. So, and this is really a no-brainer. If people are attracted to the Idea Foundry because they want to make stuff, then let's make it easy, because it's hard. We learned years ago that if you have tools, really only about 10%, 20% tops of our membership use those tools every week. But many more people belong to the Foundry because they just like the culture of making it. They like taking classes. They like hanging out with other creatives and techies, but don't necessarily have a passion project they want, but still want to get their hands dirty. That was my original intention years ago. So, pardon me. If we say, hey, we're going to build a couch. We're going to take 2 months to do it, and it's going to live in the lobby. We'll throw in, $1,000 of materials, solicit designs, RFPs, and manage it. I know you and Levi and a host of other folks were involved in a community build project 5-6 years ago, a steampunk pinball machine.
Yeah.
And we've learned a lot about whether you have a really decentralized community of people to build stuff, or whether you still have one point of management. So we're working through that.
Yeah, that job, I love that, whatever it was, I guess I said job, but that build of the steampunk pinball machine was so interesting because of the things we learned from it. Is that I feel like that was a longer project. We knew that event was an art, I can't remember exactly the name of it, but it was an art fest, Columbus Arts Fest or something like that. And we had a booth there. And so we knew with plenty of time in advance, not that always matters, but we knew with plenty of time in advance, maybe 6 months or something, that we were going to do something. And I was a part of, let's say, half the meetings in the beginning were just throwing out cool ideas. I mean, some off-the-wall wacky ideas, some not very feasible ideas, a lot of very practical ideas, but it was just like cool brainstorming session. It was fun to be a part of, but then we just leave and no work got done. So the next week we'd meet on Tuesday or whatever, and all right, let's talk about, and I just wound up generating again into, here's a crazy idea. Oh, okay. Zero follow-up, zero accountability for I just threw an idea into the wind and people thought it was cool, and the end. It was I don't know, just a discussion. It was it never got any further than that. And then eventually the deadline starts coming up and we start to think, we have done nothing. We've had a lot of meetings, but we haven't built anything. So it came down to, how do we actually get that started? So when it comes to this kind of stuff, based on my experience, not just this one, but in general, is I do think that you usually have to have at least one point person, one person in charge who, and even if they leave, let's say it's 6 months from now and you move away 3 months in, you hand all that stuff off. But it just like anything else, it becomes one person's task. But a community build, I think, would be very cool. I wouldn't even mind being that person if it seems appropriate.
And I think you'd be well suited to do that. And link to the YouTube video of our pinball machine here. Here we go.
I was going to say, I didn't know if we still had that.
Blast from the
somewhere out
past. Googling it, I found a host of images on Pinterest.
Really?
But one thing that really fascinated me.
Yeah, we
about
should have documented that more. That was before we had our stuff together.
Yeah, we're hell before I think even GoPro existed. You know, the world is evolving quickly. And here we have some of our old members too: David Kennedy, Maggie Kennedy.
Yeah, David Kennedy was the actual person who drew that original drawing, which I have somewhere. I actually have it in a. I could probably dig it up. If you go on a long rant, maybe I'll sneak away into my Google Drive and look it up. But he had a very cool original drawing with pirates and the whole theme and stuff, and then it evolved from there. So it was a very cool collaborative design thing. Oh, and I have to give, I just saw it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm going to say? One of my favorite jokes of all time, Tom, if you ever hear this, Tom Williams, one of our longtime members, the Rocket Works, which was the big rocket on side at the old shop, and he's involved. I see him all the time around here, but he had one of my favorite jokes because the whole thing was steam powered. It was based on, there's a whole image of a dirigible. Maybe he called it a Zeppelin. I don't know the difference, but he knows. And he came in and something had gone wrong or whatever, and he made the joke, "Oh, the humidity." And I just lost my mind. It was such a perfect storm.
I think the Lexan protective sheet was fogging up. And it was exactly right.
Oh, man. Oh, the humidity. It's Zeppelin themed. There's steam. He just nailed it. And I think about that joke all the time. So anyway, it just had come up there. But yeah, I guess the one we're watching right now, it had parts, the video you shared had parts of it, but then I also see Todd moving a car around. Here's a steampunk pinball debuts. So you can see, this is a great video too, kind of showing how the whole thing worked, but it was a very manual, interactive, you have to pull all these levers, and we did that on purpose. It was very Rube Goldberg-y kind of pinball machine, but it was definitely fun. It was a mad dash to the finish.
And one of the things that I learned most from that in terms of different people's management styles, you're right, there were maybe 10, 20 people sometimes at some of these initial design meetings.
Maybe more.
And then we had maybe 2 months, 3 months, so say 8, 12 meetings. And I know that it was mostly, in my opinion, in the middle of the project, after the initial design brainstorming had been done, it was I'll say the older folks. So Tom Williams, Terry Griner.
Name names on this one.
Well, older folks who were there.
Yes.
And they were working through, because they know, people who are experienced know nothing is easy. You have to plan this stuff out. Yeah. And a couple, about a month in, after 3 or 4 meetings, they realized, where's everyone else? And they kind of left. And they said, well, no one else is showing up. I'm not going to do this. And then 2 or 3 weeks before the thing was due, you and Levi show up and like, hey, we got to pound this thing out now. Yeah. And you were staying up. I think you stayed up for 2 days straight the night before.
No idea. I had an early day at work. For some reason, I had to be. So at the time, I worked at COSI, and I must have had to come in for camp-in, which is like the Girl Scouts spend the night, and I got to come in and turn the lights on, restart everything, turn the key that brings everything back online, and you got to be in there early. It's 7 a.m. or 6:45 or something, and so I remember I had done that, so I'd gotten up at 6 whatever to get there, 6 something, and then I worked a whole day there. Then it was like the next 2 days or something on the pinball machine. So it was like around 48 hours. And then you were coming to pick it up, and you said, "Oh, come and see it." When we put it out, I was like, "I don't know, man. I'm not sure I'll make it there." To the actual event.
I was surprised to tell you and Levi biked there. You actually showed up on your bicycles.
I was biking everywhere back then. Now it's motorized bicycle.
Yep.
But that's right. That's right. We did that. But here's the thing, and I've heard this said this way, is that there are two. This is why I think community builds are cool, right? It's an adventure. There are 2 types of terrible things that happen. There are things that are terrible at the time, or they're terrible at the time, but they're fun later, and they're fun at the time, but terrible later. And there are things like where, specifically, this is the story is so great, and we literally learned a lot from it too. So, but it makes a better story the fact that I stayed up the entire day before basically, and just had to keep going. We definitely went a little crazy there, but it was fun. I love looking back on that. We talk about it all the time, and it was a cool thing that we built. So
I remember Mike Shaneborn also made those.
Oh, he was a big part of it.
The bandsaw blades that are toothed that had the pinball falling between them. They were structured like a V and electrified. So as the ball went through it, it actually arced and zapped. It was great. It was a lot of fun. But I was surprised that both the older groups and the younger groups thought that the other one didn't show up. The older group thought, where are the younger guys, when the project was being designed.
Yeah.
And then when it came time to put it together, the younger guys said, where are the older folks? So, and like everything in life, it's communication.
Yeah, and what do people see as their role, or what level of commitment do they have? Did people think I'll show up for the design because that's what I want to do, or maybe I'm a professional at that? Maybe that's what I'm lending you is my design services. Plenty of people here that we know that do that. Then they're like, oh, I'm not a welder, but I can show you. Kennedy was like that, where he just showed up, drew the stuff out, and then I'm not a builder. I'll paint some stuff on the final product or whatever, but I'm not going to be welding it for you or whatever. I don't know how to do that. So that's why one project manager helps, because they can say, all right, these people are welding. They're taking it. Once you've designed it, they're just going to take your designs and do it. So, I mean, obviously project management is no small thing. That is, a lot of people do that for a living and get paid a lot of money to do it. So that's the part of it that definitely needs attention from the beginning.
And I think that's the nature of experience. So you've done it, you figured it out. Technical question, I'd like to upload a photo in one of the comments, and I see an insert an emoji. I wonder if did you're pinning a comment?
No.
Drag and drop?
I think that normally, but it's possible that there are slightly different. Nick said drag and drop. I forgot. No, anyone can see that. Nick is in his office, and we're kind of in his office. But he said you can. Yeah, and Blake's saying you can't do it live. I think that live videos don't necessarily allow those type of comments.
I see. I could insert a link. Yeah. Hell, I'll just do that. It is a Pinterest link.
Yeah, if Levi's listening, he could maybe dig up the drive. He could dig up that original drawing. That would be cool to see.
Did you see Levi posted that? In fact, he was talking about the pinball.
Yeah, so
machine.
Levi works at Roto Studio, which long time ago was the build department for the exhibit department of COSI, and then they split off. This is a long time ago, and then they make exhibits all over the world, and that's what Levi does for a living. So there's an original drawing from David Kennedy that I have in my Google Docs, but it's hard to do two things at once. But and he said he was just mentioning that the other day in a meeting. But it is a reference because it is a thing to reference because it was a big learning experience. There's a lot that happened there. So anyway, we should do another one, whether it's for an event around here, Independence Day or something like that I know is coming up, but or it's just to decorate our own space, whatever the, like you said, a couch, something like that we can then enjoy the benefits of.
And we're starting to see some of that with our second floor build out. I know that Evgeny Dvoretsky did a kind of water themed CNC ripple that sits above our water fountain, and those are one off projects, but I'd like to see some collaboration. Some broader collaboration. So the reason we're talking about this is because this Facebook Live podcasting process is a way that we'd like to hear your ideas about what we should do. And this is what we tried half a year back. Community build was the number one thing. After that, a meetup on fabrication. We have meetups on 3D printing right now, on business. The Cap City biohackers have a biohacking meetup. Tyvara runs a product hunt. It's like a Shark Tank thing. But I'd like to see a specific meetup just on fabrication. And the theme can vary from month to month. It could be lasering. It can be CNC. It can be welding. It can be X-Acto knives and poster board. The other meetups that people wanted were digital design. So, of course, if you're going to use things like lasers, 3D printers, and CNC machines, how do you make the files that feed those? Video games was another big one. I don't know if this is just learning how to make them, which is a class that Multivarious Games is going to be teaching at the Foundry, or playing them. I know a lot of us like to play video games, and we have a hell of an a network here, so I'd like to see some LAN parties. Big hit for cooking. I still think that the fraction of people who like to do 3D printing and electronics and programming is a narrow pie slice of the general population. The fraction of people who like to eat and drink is pretty much everyone.
I would say so.
Then we had art sketching, life hacking, speaker series. So those were the things that people wanted to see us hosting as meetups. We go to the next slide. We'd asked, okay, what are the classes that you'd like to see us teach? We have a little bit of a bottleneck problem where we have 20, 30 freelance instructors. Each of our instructors can teach 5, 10, 20 classes. We can't possibly put 500 or 1,000 classes on our website, beta test them all. So I'd rather put the horse in front of the cart, find out what our membership, find out what Columbus or Central Ohio wants to learn, and then do that. So at the top of the list, we had vacuum forming, metal turning, metal milling. And these are numbers at the bottom now, not just percentages. So we had 14, 15 people who wanted these classes. And if most of our classes have 5 or 6 folks, we're talking 2 or 3 classes here, which I think is a good indication that there's an appetite for it more broadly through the city. If there are only 2 or 3 people who want something, then that may be a one-off class, but then to keep reaching into a deep bench of folks who want it, that might not happen. So I'm proud to say that I think Steve Sauer, one of our longtime members and one of the founders of Bigger Tuna, the industrial design company here, he's been teaching, I think he's taught 3 or 4 of these vacuum forming classes. Metal turning, we've stood up a class. We're going to be buying a new mill early July, because Paul Rothrock, who has been kind enough to lend us his South Bend lathe, I said mill, we're buying a new lathe.
Oh, lathe. Okay.
July 1. Paul has taken his South Bend back. A 60 or 70-year-old machine, still works great. So we're trying to work with Cop Tool and Jay Amstutz, our longtime friend at Central Ohio Power Tool, to buy some equipment. That'll be happening in July. Marvin is one of our new metal machining instructors. Marvin Schmidt, who's a longtime, I think, high school machining instructor. And he's teaching a beta class on how to mill maybe this week. I know it was scheduled to be a couple weeks back. We pushed it. And then marketing, we've had a fellow from CCAD. What was his name? I hope he's not listening right now. His first and last name both started with B.
Well, in your defense, it is difficult sometimes to recall while people are listening. One of the rules of podcasting is you try not to do math, no matter how simple it is. I know you're great at doing it on the fly, but you'll inevitably 5 times 100. What was that again? 5,000. It's 5,000, right? And you'll just inevitably make a mistake. And of course, everyone listening has all the time in the world, and there's no pressure on them, so it's easy for other people to do that. So recalling someone's name sometimes can be difficult. You know what I wanted to go back and say, and you talked about if we have some interest but not enough for a class, or maybe not enough for a recurring class. Something we did yesterday was we just gathered a group of people who were interested in looking at the carburetors on motorcycles. Yes. And so there were 6 of us, maybe total, 5 or 6 of us, and that's one of the advantages of the Idea Foundry is it's the networking kind of thing. We have a place, we have a group of people who want to learn similar things. So if it turns out it's not a class, don't force it into being a class, or don't make it a class and it's always empty or whatever. Don't have that disappointment. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't just email the 4 people that said they would want to do it and say, we're meeting together, and hey, if you want to pay for materials, or I'll buy dinner, or whatever it winds up being that you work out, this is a perfect place for that. And you never know where classes could develop from that, but that's an easier way of circumventing the whole it has to be a class, we have to get this many people kind of thing. So if you think it's more of a niche.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because what we're talking about right now is I might call it top-down interviews or surveys. But if we can just make a platform where members can say, hey, I want to learn this, and another member can say, hey, I can teach you that, and we're hands off, and they just make a transaction, whether it's buying burgers and beer or whether it's actual cash, I'd be grateful to see that happen. And we're seeing some of that already through the Facebook page, but a lot of it is still people asking around, hey, does anyone know XYZ? So I'd like to see eventually a skills library where we have public profiles for any members who want to upload what they do, what their interests are, what their skills are, what their experience is, what their network is, and then people can say, hey, I'm looking for this, and we do some digital matchmaking. So let's see, what else was...
Yeah, I know that you had talked about, that's something that's on the radar right now, is skills library. So at some point, people will be able to, on their own, upload. What are you good at? Is it photography, graphic design, websites, welding, woodworking, that kind of stuff? And then if we want to connect those people together in an informal, or you know what I mean, just the connection, then that's something we can be able to do. What were you looking for now?
So this is why we need a producer. I accidentally closed the browser that had 6 or 8 open tabs.
A bad job of it as well.
I'm about to ask Nick if he wants to be our producer for today.
Oh,
and I think Nick is wearing his his wireless earbuds in and he can't hear what we're saying. Ironic that he might be able to read us.
Well, there's a delay, so in 20 seconds we'll know if he was listening.
That's exactly right.
He's going to think you guys are pretty silly.
Well, I imagine if he's got his earbuds in, he's listening to something other than us.
I'm going through all my design files originally from those meetings, but I cannot seem to find that original drawing, which I thought was so cool. But anyway, I'm going to give up on it because, like you said, we're wasting too much time clicking around on the internet.
And another technical question,
go ahead,
Dylan. When I'm looking at the original post, our podcast is live.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see my original posts. I see 5 or 6. I see your pinned comment.
Do you want me to pin your stuff to it?
No. But if I click on the video, then on the
then
right, I can see
scroll.
all the comments. Yeah, that's a funny thing.
I think that's just a way that Facebook is trying to, if you're seeing it in the feed, they're trying to just keep things super current. Mm-hmm. Things are alive. This is what's happening at the moment. These are the comments you're seeing at the moment. But then later on in the if you click on the video itself, you can go back in time and see more of what's happening. I think you could even restart it if you just want to see this whole thing from the beginning. I'm sure you can restart it there, but why would you want to not be live? You can interact with us. There is a question there. Did you want to address it while I blab on about something else?
A question or a comment?
A comment in there, but it's saying Paul? We should talk about this. Some of the things, the broader vision you have. Get some stuff that might be able to make that all happen.
Yeah, Paul teaches some business classes at the Idea Foundry, and the things that make a business work. Boring stuff like accounting that really is very important. And we're grateful to him for that. And I know he's had a lot of ideas on co-working and other things too. So let's look at, so the reason I looked for the old link is that I can open that presentation again. And
yeah, so specifically if you're talking about the presentation, the number one thing we're talking about was proposed meetups. And initially we're talking about, I know you said this too, that we want to have more meetups in general.
Yeah.
And so a good place to start is what do people self-report to us and say that they want to have. So community build is the number one thing on there. So it sounds like that should happen. I think that's also an interesting way because last week Matt Hatcher was talking about ways to bring in new members. Some people have taken a class or two and they're maybe not, they've taken the class, but they're not comfortable on their own to use the table saw or one of the more scarier tools or whatever it is. So a community build would be a perfect way to do that. Hey, we've designed this thing. I'm going to go cut it on the table saw. So anyone who wants to go and stand over there and ask questions or see how the whole thing works, that's an easy way to just be involved. And if you're less technically capable, you could just be an assistant, or you could volunteer for the easier jobs or whatever, the learning kind of jobs. So I think that's a great thing that should happen. That's something that we should work on, let's say between today and next video that we do on Friday at 2, just in case anyone's listening. Always Friday at 2. Are you still looking for some information on there?
No, what I've done is I've restarted. I realized that when I close that browser, it closed the whole presentation. So anyone who wanted to ask a question through the Google Slides Q&A.
Oh yeah, I see that's gone now. Sorry, it's closed. But at least we have, because I think that's a bit of redundant because we do have the Facebook comments.
Yeah.
So I personally prefer to look at them that way. But of course, asking a slide or asking a question in this Q&A thing is helpful for a presenter. But yeah, it's closed on me. I can't.
There was a way to restart it, but I'm not going to fiddle with that right now. But I'm just grateful that looking at the top, 5 or 10 classes that people said they wanted starting in December, vacuum forming, metal turning, metal machining, marketing, mold making. We've got classes on the books for all these, and it's funny, these abbreviations. One of them is how to develop and I'm not sure what the full word is, but it says how to develop a bra. I know that's not
Where are you looking at that?
This is the third slide. It says classes, parenthesis 1. And,
right, because
it's abbreviated.
Titles are cut off.
And that was, we'll figure out what that was.
Yeah, but I think that classes is obviously something interesting too, just to know what classes are we missing that people would like to take. I see battle bots on there as classes, and that would be an interesting community build. A class on battle bots I see having a few barriers to entry, namely cost if you're a whole team? I mean, how's that whole thing work?
Well, I tell you, we're big fans of SparkFun, the electronics company out in Boulder, and Jeff Branson, who's one of their employees and chief evangelists, drives around in an RV evangelizing the culture of tech. And he has pitched that instead of these decent-sized, vacuum cleaner-sized robots, that you do these real small, he calls it run what you brung. Okay. So you bring a 1 pound, 2 pound robot. They're tiny little things.
That person's not calling to get on the show,
No, this is my brother. So
you don't get on the show.
If he wants to, he can text me.
But when you said that, I was like, I don't have the technical capability to add them in, but I could. We had to. We could do it.
So what I'd love to see is a CNC machined Mario Kart-like 12-foot by 12-foot by 3-foot maze with ramps and things like that. Even put cameras inside there so that we can see stuff around corners, and then have, say, 4 first-person view robots where you wear the goggles. And I know that Nick and Chris Kling and Will Nickley are working on making those. I know we drove one around the shop. And Carmen's joining us in our new community office here. Would love to do that. Would love to see, and that's something that originally I thought we would do in the basement, just because the basement was kind of creepy. The word Robot Fight Club sounds good. But if we build a modular track, we can put it in the event space. We can bring it to schools. We can bring it to COSI. A lot of that fun kind of stuff.
Yeah, I like that idea. It's you see that as a meetup kind of thing that people are working on, or maybe like a contest meetup class.
So we have had the drone racing event where folks take a 3-part class from Will Nickley, and I think Chris is also part of that.
So is it 3 classes and then the race, or the classes you're counting the race as the third part?
The race is the last part of the third class. Okay. So class 1, you learn how to fly line of sight a drone. Class 2, you learn how to fly it first-person view by wearing the goggles. Class 3, you actually start to do some maneuvering and racing. And last time we had a high school team, it was about 15 kids, learned that. And then we had an adult league, first-person Buckeye FPV. And what I thought was great is the winner of the high school team, their prize was to compete in the adult league. Yeah. And the high school winner, he came in middle of the pack in the adult team.
I was at that event. It was very cool. There was up on the mezzanine level, or the third floor, sort of overlooking the grandstands, they had pit row, and everyone was working on their bots in between, or whatever, the drones, and checking out their equipment and stuff, and they were all laid out, and you could talk to them about it. I mean, that was even the coolest part for me, being more technical, is I want to know how they're doing it, and how long you've been racing these things and stuff. So it was very cool to what a cool event to go and do that kind of stuff. Drone racing is one of those things where you think of the idea Foundry, you think of drone racing, you think of there's cool stuff I don't know about, and drone racing happens to be one of those. So.
Yeah, and so when we're looking at what did people want 6 months back, when I see kind of Robot Fight Club or the BattleBots, I'm lumping in the drone racing there.
You just say Robot Fight Club because BattleBots is proprietary. That someone else named it. I agree. Robot Fight Club and BattleBots are the same thing.
So Robot Fight Club also, to me, feels more democratic. It's like, hey, I can fight in a fight club. In fact, if you show up, you have to. Whereas BattleBots makes it feel like I have to have a sponsored team. I have to be on TV.
I agree. It definitely sounds like a bigger ordeal than just show up and fight. It sounds pretty intense. What do you've talked a couple times about this. I want to go back to the proposed meetup kind of thing. How do you see it? It just says fabrication. A lot of people, that's the second highest voted response. And how do you see a fabrication? Is it general fabrication? Is it a welding meetup?
So what I think we should do is, and when I say meetup, not only is it a regular meeting of people here at the Idea Foundry, say second Tuesday of every month, but that there's also communication infrastructure wrapped around that, so that when things are discussed, that information is saved somewhere online. So much like I'm trying to do with the business members meetup, I feel bad if we have 6 really great speakers for 6 months, and then a new member joins on the 7th month, and they have no idea, they don't have any access to what we've done. So we can archive that information. And we still do, these shared Google documents. If you find a tip or a trick on the laser or on the ShopBot or 3D printer, then put that information in an online repository that all of our members, and maybe eventually everyone in the world, has access to. So when we talk about a meetup, I'm seeing a separate Facebook group a separate list of the email addresses of people who subscribe to that. So you have this little microcosm of people who said, I want to be in on a conversation about fabrication. Clearly, some of this can be on the public Facebook, on the private Facebook members group, but I don't want to inundate everyone, especially now that we have a new population of co-working members who may not really be too interested in the fabrication. I don't want to spam everyone with all that traffic.
No, I totally agree. I think that it doesn't need to be done when it comes to organizing those things. I think a lot about this Facebook groups and stuff too. You don't want to turn people off to just constantly some my question about minutia about what bolt should I use in this or whatever. A lot of people, maybe it's interesting, but I think a lot of people are just going to think I'm here for another reason. And it's nice to decide ways to break that out. It would be kind of cool. We get plenty of questions in the members thing, but it would be kind of cool to direct those to a specific outlet and talk about this is more of a fabrication question. Ask those guys because it's more closely paid attention to, and if there are less posts in general, they're not going to get kicked down to the bottom, and they have a longer life, half-life or whatever it winds up being that they're on there. So
and I think that if we do split out different groups, the other thing we should do is have themes for each meetup. So I know that Ethan Dix has been running the 3D printers meetup for many years, 7 years, 8 years. I dare say it's probably the longest running public 3D printing meetup in the U.S., if not the world. And when those folks come here, they bring their machines. It's a spectacular zoological taxonomy of different types of machines. You got the deltas, which look like almost a 3D printer on marionette strings, and you've got the FDM, the STL machines, SLA machines. But there isn't always a speaker. There isn't always a theme for that night. So I think for the business members meetup, we've been saying, hey, let's bring an accountant, let's bring a lawyer, let's bring a marketing person, an SEO person. So I think for fabrication, we should bring in a person who can talk about 10 minutes on laser cutting, different materials, different techniques. Another month can be CNC. And if we find that there is enough interest to split off purely laser or purely CNC, then we can do that. So I think fabrication is a general catch-all for everything we're doing here that involves making things. Maybe since 3D printing is already its own separate gig and somewhat managed in a slightly different domain through Ethan's Google group. It's the Central Ohio RepRap and MakerBot.
But
group.
You sort of see, as the fabrication meetup, you sort of see it's sort of secondary intent is to, if there are a bunch of people that are just here for ShopBot, then there probably should be a ShopBot specific thing. Yeah. But I like that. It's also a way of getting people in. I think that what happens is I'm not saying this is a flow for every member, but I think a typical flow is you take the classes, you decide you want to be a member, you found out about us who knows how, an event, a meeting, a Facebook post, and you show up for the first time after taking the class, and maybe you have a project, maybe you get it done, maybe you don't, maybe you aren't quite sure, so you just kind of hang out. But any excuse, the fabrication meetup, any sort of the Cinco de Mayo party, any excuse to show up is better. It gets you in the door, and you start to get more comfortable with the layout, how things work, the tools, where can I go, where do I put my stuff, that kind of stuff. The awkward learning a new place kind of questions.
100%.
So,
and like the analogy might be first year as a freshman in high school.
Sure.
Like you know you're supposed to be here. People probably have the same interests, but you still feel bashful about knocking on someone's door or sitting down at lunch.
Yeah, we always use this analogy, and maybe I'm overusing it, but I always think about it like the gym, and I feel like when you first start working out or whatever, you go to a gym and do I put the weights here? Is this guy using this? That kind of stuff. So I think that's very applicable to what's going on here. Is this anyone's stuff? Is this that guy's stuff?
Yeah.
So the more you're here, the more you'll learn that kind of stuff. So whose stuff goes where and where your stuff goes. So anyway, a general fabrication meetup, I think that would be great. And do you see people from outside the community as the speakers, or do you see we'll have Ben do it because he's great at the ShopBot or something like that?
Yeah, well, this is a good question too. And even whether or not these meetups are exclusively for Idea Foundry members or open to the general public. And currently, all of our meetups are open to the general public. One of the reasons is I've met a lot of people, I'm grateful to say, off-site, where they say, Idea Foundry, love you guys, never been.
Yeah.
So we need more free reasons to come down.
Yeah,
and this is why we're grateful for some of our corporate sponsors. People like VSP, people like Tyvara, some of our corporate anchor tenants here who don't just check in at 9, punch out at 5. They say, we'll give you a few $100 each month to promote a Facebook post, to buy pizza and beer. And that's how this ecosystem works. But I like to bring in fresh insight, new blood. So certainly outside speakers make a lot of sense. But then having people who really know the ins and outs of these tools. And this is one thing I remember Don Sell, one of our old woodworking instructors, would say, I'm not going to teach you how to use these tools. I'm going to teach you how to use these tools. And there's a difference. So the idiosyncrasies of our where we hide the key for the XYZ. Open to whatever brings value to the community, not just having someone gab for gabbing's sake, but someone who everyone really wants to hear from.
The only reason I asked that is because I wanted sort of a little bit of a distinction, or at least to understand in my mind, that I know we've had like laser bits we've had come in, and different, we've had other vendors come in and sort of explain what they can offer us, but you don't see it as much like that. Like Flood Heliarc, for example, they offer laser services that we just cannot provide here. They have much more powerful lasers. Is that the kind of thing where you want to have it come in and explain? It could get a little salesy. I'm not saying specifically from them, but in general, or is it just members talk about welding or the CNC or laser?
I'm not smart enough to know what the right answer is, but I think we're all learning by doing fans here. So let's do it. I know that we had what was her name from Laird, one of the representatives, and the intention was that it was commercial. It was, hey, these are products we've got. This is how you laser this thing, and it costs this much, and that's very actionable intel.
I don't think commercial is a bad word. No, I think there's a time and a place.
But what we were also grateful for is that she said, hey, tell you what, when we have a bunch of scrap, we'll drop it off for you. So there are opportunities above and beyond just a regular Joe walking in the door and saying, hey, what do you have to sell me? So I see a mix. I see people who can provide the materials, some new talent, and then also allowing some of our more talented, hardworking people to a little bragging rights. Like if someone did something really amazing, I think they should have the megaphone. Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah, that happens a lot where people either do that online or whatever. Where I know Zach Sanderson just finished that project. Is what I was thinking of, where he had done the show and tell on Adafruit.
Yes,
and they have a weekly thing or whatever. So that would be an interesting thing to do internally. Is Matt Hatcher can walk us through how that beautiful front desk that I mentioned. I think I mentioned it last week, or I definitely mentioned the week before. But I think it's great. It's a fantastic thing that we have now. And
one of our members, Art Crumsey, retired, I think, information officer from OSU. He's been written up in Make Magazine the last few months, 2 or 3 times, for some of the 3D printing and laser cutting he's been doing. And hell, I mean, if some of our folks are getting a national opportunity, we'd sure as hell better and give them a local opportunity also to tell their story.
That I always think of that as the rising tide raises all boats.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of thing. That is a great summary for the idea Foundry, is that we can all help each other. There's no reason why not to do that kind of stuff.
Totally agreed.
I was trying to see if you had anything to add on that, where I could read the latest comment on here. But something I wanted to mention was that I know that I was down there with the laser the other day, and there's a whole table of scrap. You had mentioned that, and I know that on the CIF members page, someone had said, "Oh, I'm grateful for all this orange acrylic that someone had, because you could prototype knives in it." And I've done that plenty. Acrylic is perfect for 2D sort of flat prototyping. If you have something where you just want to get the idea of the size of it, I mean, I built an entire company off of this kind of thing, where you prototyped something and you get the idea of the size. Oh, what if it was smaller? What if it had a little bit more grip from my hand or whatever it was? You cut another one. It takes a minute to cut a lot of the stuff out on the laser, and with an 1/8 acrylic or whatever it is, and it's perfect for prototyping. And there's an entire table downstairs of just scraps anyone could come up and use. It's a ton of free good stuff.
And it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned prototyping and how to do things quickly. Bill Kondo just walked in the door. I know he's involved with Startup Weekend, and in a couple of months, June 23rd, 24th, and 25th. I think it happens to be the ComFest weekend, but we're going to be having the Startup Weekend here at the Idea Foundry, where we'll have maybe 150 folks who will self-organize into 15 or so teams of about 10 people each. And typically in a Startup Weekend, you think of ideas. Your product is a business plan and a business pitch. And by Sunday night, You make that to a bunch of experts, and someone's picked as the winner, and they get some things like consulting hours for free from Rev1 and from other places too. But more importantly, they get the opportunity to work with 150 interesting people and kick around potential real-world solutions for some businesses. They want to do a make-themed event in June, and that means people are going to be prototyping everything from, I'm imagining, wearable tech to cute and kitschy projects. I know Nick has been making some new types of spinners, if you know the little fidget things that kids are playing with in schools. Man, I feel and sound old. But
what are the kids calling them these days? Yeah, you're fine.
But thank you. But we've realized that if you just bring 150 earnest, creative people into the shop for a weekend, you can't just say, "Hey, go loose on the tools." Even having half a dozen kind of member experts to steward people through the process isn't enough. So we're putting together two-hour seminars. One will be end of May, one will be middle of June, where the people who are going to be participating in Startup Weekend will come for like a 2-hour intro on this is 2D design for the laser, this is how the laser works, this is 3D design for 3D printer, this is how the 3D printer works. So they come a little bit pre-charged with some of that information, and then we'll have experts, Brad, Matt, Will, Nick, Chris, I know Todd Perkins wants to be involved. I'll be there, who can serve as folks to take the ideas they've been kicking around for a while and make them. But honestly, the fastest way I think to prototype stuff will be X-Acto knife, poster board, duct tape. You don't necessarily need that laser 3D printer.
You know, Corey came up with an idea the other day that I thought was pretty cool, and he said, "All right, we all agreed." He just randomly walked by and pitched it to a couple of us, and he said, "Okay, what's the next step?" And I was like, "Draw it from every angle you can think of, just whatever way that you know. If you're not, and I only know this because I know I don't think he's into SketchUp or 3D design or AutoCAD. Draw it a bunch of different ways, and then if you have it kind of explained visually in that way, whiteboard kind of thing, and then if you give it to someone who does do 3D design, if you decide it's worth going down that road, and then you want to either pay for their time or just get a friend to do it or whatever, or learn to do SketchUp yourself, at least you have the drawings. A lot of the times, I'll even draw it out on a piece of paper before I go and make it in there, because it's quicker to make changes typically, depending on what you're doing.
And just to reference Mr. Bill Kondo again, we had a working lunch at Strongwater, and he said, I'm a geek. I thought he was pulling out a piece of paper, old-fashioned kind of thing. He pulled out a foldable whiteboard that he keeps in. Yeah. So very rapid prototyping.
Yeah, super useful. So Jason talked about. He said he wanted to do, and I totally agree. We were talking about this informally last Friday, where there should be, now that we've gotten all the offices are occupied, or we know who those tenants are gonna be. Yeah. So it would be a perfect time to start a meet your neighbor kind of mixer thing, a block party, let's say, up for the second floor. And I also think that if it's the second floor people presenting who they are or mingling or whatever, it should obviously be open for anyone. But we should do that. And I don't know when the best time is, because my impression, I'm going to stereotype second floor people a little bit, but it's they might be more 9 to 5 schedule, and they might be home for the family and the kids or whatever. They have things to do after 5. So the typical maybe 5 o'clock thing might not work or whatever. Maybe it's in the middle of the day. Maybe it's the end of the day, 3 to 4 or something.
Yeah, a couple months back, Chris Howell organized a Middle West Spirits tasting at around, I think, 3:30, 4 o'clock on Friday.
That was a good meeting.
So I think that's some stuff, and we're going to be we're grateful that I think we can announce this. Kate Baldwin, who is the member relations person for the Columbus Museum of Art, will be joining us on staff, I think, May 22nd, so 10 days from now, and she'll be building the culture of exactly what we're talking about. How do you have more meet your neighbors? I know you had kicked around the phrase meet your maker when we were interviewing workshop members. So this is a great way for both workspace members to meet each other and to meet the workshop members and both. And maybe one thing, you just throw food and booze and drinks and space at people, and they tend to have a good time. But I went to a Wonderland event maybe 5-6 years back called Wonder Blender, which was speed dating for creatives. And it was at one of the bars downtown. They had about maybe 40, 50 people, 20 seats. So 20 people would sit in the seats, And then 20 people would sit there and chat for 60 seconds. What do you do? Oh, I'm a web developer. What do you do? I'm a graphic artist. What do you do? I'm a sound designer. And just get to know each other and then rotate after a minute. And, think of how many hundreds of connections that results in. Love to do stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is such a cool place. I personally have a hard time with that question, what do you do? But this is such a cool place to ask people that, because sometimes you'll just be shocked by, oh my gosh, I had no idea that you did all this stuff. Or we have someone here that is into VR or whatever it is, that obviously we have the game makers or something like that, where it's a cool thing you never even would have known unless you asked what they did or whatever. You definitely overhear some funny conversations around here with what people are making.
And even with Jason, he's a residential realtor. And we were working on our carburetors last night, and he just wandered in after having visited the condos in the Levesque Tower. And I forgot, either he owns a motorcycle or a scooter.
He has a couple, I've seen, yeah.
So everyone's got common interests, and folks you may not think are makers are, and folks you think might not be entrepreneurs are.
Well, he should be at the motorcycle meetup.
That's another one where we do need, I think, a speaker. What we're seeing with our meetups is you're getting the same people who show up, 4, 5, 6 people, and they know each other and they hang out. But I think if we have a little bit of new blood, an invited speaker, and there's no shortage of people who are talented and who want to talk about this kind of stuff.
This is a great town for that. This is a great place for that. So there's no reason why, we couldn't find people to talk on those kind of things. We're coming up on the end of the time. You want to tell me a little bit more about Montreal? How did it go? What did you talk about?
Quebec, yeah. So I was in Montreal 6 months ago and Quebec last week.
I was speaking more broadly.
I see. Is Quebec in the... Montreal is in the region of Quebec, I think, but
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's not. There are probably some Canadians listening. Yeah, we know all about it, of course. Yeah. Proceed.
What I'm grateful for is more and more cities, especially the economic development departments, are recognizing the utility of putting all the city's makers and entrepreneurs and creatives under one roof. And especially if you can put it in a creative neighborhood that's got a brewery next door, that's got a science museum, that's got an art museum. Pretty much. And who doesn't love a scrappy story about the downtrodden, revitalizing neighborhood now being the model for startup communities around the world?
And you notice when we set up the camera view, I'm really trying to show the construction aspect of we're still building out here in Franklinton.
Yeah. So we've gotten Nibbles on the line. We help consult with folks about how to manage a workshop, how to build a co-working space. We're still learning that ourselves, and how to run this gig. And so we've had Nibbles from Singapore, Tel Aviv, Sao Paulo, Medellin. We've had concrete contracts and visits to Montreal, Quebec, and then half a dozen cities in Ohio, McConnellsville, Nelsonville, Marietta, Somerset, Wilmington, Worthington, Dayton. Yesterday we had 60 people from a delegation from Greensboro, North Carolina. So I think as we figure out how to make this whole gig work, we're going to be invited to more places to help spread this culture. And I think one of the best ways to do this is digitally as well. So until communities have the funds and organization and stakeholders to have a brick and mortar space, let's make a Facebook page for every city for all the makers there, and organize skill shares and two-way digital town hall communications like this, and have a lot of fun.
Well, that's valuable information. I know when I moved to Florida, I tried to look in, is there something like this locally? And there were little blips of people trying to organize it or whatever, but if we can share our experience and say, here's how we did it, or here's where you start. Is it with meetups? Is it just get out there and do something, that kind of thing? Is it sharing things on Facebook? Don't like that comment from Zach Bacon. I just saw you do that.
We all love Zach.
Hey, Zach, maybe we didn't advertise to you for a reason. I shared this on Facebook for to everybody but him, just so he wouldn't get on here and troll us. So it's a good thing that he got on here late. We were just finishing up, and lucky we got out of here alive without him.
I will say that I think one of the reasons we're not yet promoting this far and wide is we're still figuring out the kinks. Like the first 15 minutes, you heard me say I accidentally closed my browser window and lost the presentation. So maybe we actually need a producer, figure out the tech, and then I think we'll push this more publicly on our 10,000
I have things to talk to you about that don't fit in the time here, but I have an idea of how this whole thing looks, and I think actually at some point what I will do is I'll briefly explain how this one will work. Is I think this Friday Facebook at the Foundry will spin off into its own Facebook page, and that way you could follow that page if you're like super concerned about that, and then that way you can actually do notifications. So if we do go live, or if we're going live in an hour, we can put those notifications out there if like you think this is the world's most valuable thing, and then that way we don't have to put a bunch of that stuff on the just take over the regular CIF members page. I can share that on the CIF members page so everyone can see when it is in fact going live, but it lives in its own place, and then that way if we want to poll people, or if we want to prep some kind of information or whatever, it all lives there. And then I also think that if people are more don't want to sit here and watch a Facebook live video, there'll be an audio version that will go out, you know, right after this one, that you can, if you're a podcast person, it'll just come into your app.
And just to add a little bit to that, and not to steal any of your future thunder, but I know you've also got an idea for a single landing page for all the podcasts that everyone here at the Idea Foundry, whether it's Idea Foundry members proper, or guests, or individual folks want to host their own podcast using this equipment, this setup, and then as we grow more of a, call it a fan base, you know, we've got 10,000 folks on Facebook who like us, then that rising tide lifting all ships works.
Yes.
People can find one of our members' podcasts and give them a little early boost.
So that's the exact point of that, is that something we offer that way will be, hey, if you're starting a new podcast, you start from zero. You have no members, you don't know, you know, whatever, you have your own network of people, but after that you don't know. So you start a podcast, whether it's once a month, once every 6 months, whatever, it will when it goes live, we'll just add it to our feed. It'll be on our webpage. That's the Idea Foundry podcast network, and then when you'll be on the master feed also, so if anyone subscribes to this on their phone, you'll just be included in there, so you'll automatically have some listeners who might know about yours, and then if they want to subscribe specifically to yours only, they can do that, of course. That's easy to do. You'll just go in your app or on the website or whatever and subscribe to just that podcast. But if you want to get the master feed, I think that'd also be fun too. You get an idea of what goes on here, and it's not specifically. I'm saying literally any member who is a member and has a podcast that they want to put up there, whether it's about music or something completely unrelated to the Idea Foundry, it doesn't matter. You'll be included in that stream, and then that way you can kind of dip in and see what people are doing if you're into that kind of thing. So that's the not too long-term goal,
Sure.
but it took me a while to figure out how that whole thing looks and where it lives, and basically, you know, who's involved and how do you get included. So I'm just 90% of the way there, I will say. But okay, thanks for this. I'm glad we were able to do this, even though we got kicked out of our room. But now we're in I even forgot to mention that we're in the clubhouse. We're the
That's right.
The CIF staff clubhouse, which is the northwest corner, kind of the unused room up until a week ago, and then we got carpet in here and everything. So it's all good. All right, thanks a lot, Alex.
Hey, thank you, Dylan.
Bye.